Okay.
This is the May 3rd meeting of the Marin Municipal Water District, and I need a roll call.
Director Kohler,
Here.
Director Schmidt,
Here.
Director Bragman,
I'm here.
Director Gibson,
Here.
and President Russell.
Here. Okay, is there any, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any public comment on the agenda?
There are none.
Okay, then we will adjourn to the closed session.
Okay.
Oh, we need a roll call, don't we, on the agenda?
No, I'm sorry, President Russell, we just wanted to see probably first if there were any public comments on the closed session item.
I asked that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant the agenda. I don't think we have any.
Oh, isn't it the agenda for the closed session? Isn't that what we're asking about?
No, before we go to closed session, we typically will allow comments from the public on the closed session item, but
Okay, so
it's unusual to have them.
that's the question, Terry. Is there any?
No, there are none. There are no public comments for the closed session.
Okay. Then we need to adjourn and go to the other login.
Well, correct. We'll see you at the closed.
Okay, cool.
The closed session adjourned at 7:30 with no reportable action. With that, I would like to get a motion to approve the agenda.
Move approval of the agenda. Second.
Roll call.
I think that we
Or
did,
public
Terry, did we
comment.
approve the agenda prior to?
I think we did
Okay.
that.
Okay, thank you. I'm
Well,
sorry. I think we took care of that. We're ahead of the game.
We started to, but we didn't have a vote. We got sidetracked on that about the closed session, about the public comments on the closed session. And we never finished, I don't believe.
Terry,
that
do we need to take a
full
roll call
discussion.
vote on the agenda?
Yes, so the agenda was first motioned by Director Bragman, then
Okay.
Vice President Schmidt had seconded the adoption of the agenda, but I didn't take the roll
Okay.
because of the public comment. So I can do that right now.
Perfect.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Bragman, Director Gibson,
Aye. Sorry. Aye.
sorry, Director Gibson,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we're asking for any public comment on items not on the agenda.
Yes, there are several. The first two are James Krajewski and Ed Jamison. Mr. Krajewski, I've allowed you to speak, sir.
All right, thank you. I wanted to comment on something I saw on the recording of the last meeting, which I was not able to watch at the time. It seemed very bizarre to me. The word rationing appeared on a slide, and Director Kohler had vigorous objections to the word, saying that the water district has never rationed watering in all the time that she was here. I've been in Marin for 45 years, and I lived through several droughts, and the water district has put restrictions on in all of these. So why we would throw out a common sense word of rationing, I have no idea. It was most bizarre. I've looked at dictionary definitions of rationing. For example, the dictionary.com says it's a regulated allocation of resources among possible users. So I don't understand what it was about the word, the R word, that triggered this reaction. And then it was said that, well, we'll remove the word from that slide or future slides. And maybe I didn't understand exactly what the meaning of it was. We won't use the word again. So instead, we're going to use words like water efficiency and conservation measures and demand reduction. Well, there's nothing more Orwellian than a word like demand reduction, which essentially means we demand that you reduce your water use. So why the district would get into micromanaging common sense words like rationing, I have no idea. Director Kohler said it didn't meet some technical definition. I don't know what that technical definition was, even after she explained it. But I think we need a rational approach, not an irrational approach to rationing. So I hope the board will stop micromanaging water use and micromanaging words. There's no doubt when we've been prohibited from using water on certain days of the week or in things like car washing or whatever, that is some version of rationing. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jameson.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thanks very much. I'd like to briefly comment on MMWD's prohibition of using potable water for sewer cleaning. At the April 15th operations meeting, Steve Moore, General Manager of the Ross Valley Sanitation District, asked for revocation of Prohibition 1M as from Ordinance number 449, requiring use of recycled water for sewer cleaning. This requirement was one of many measures MMWD enacted to save potable water in the drought crisis, but in retrospect, it was clearly a mistake. Last May, Ross Valley Sanitary estimated the ordinance would save only 4 acre-feet annually in MMWD's service area at a stunning estimated cost of $165,000 per acre foot. The measure has saved minimal water while continuing to cause operational problems and excessive expenses for the sanitation districts, and it continues to damage expensive sanitary district equipment. Ross Valley Sanitary also attributes $500,000 damage to the homes of 3 customers that resulted at least partly from the lower productivity of its employees that was caused by Prohibition 1M. I urge the district to expediently rescind Prohibition 1M of Ordinance 449. To my disappointment, I don't see this on the list of restrictions to be lifted tonight, and I'd like to suggest that the board add this to its discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next 3 speakers, Larry Minikes, Abby, and Bill Hansel. Mr. Minikes, please.
Good evening, board, staff. I'd like to first speak to last week's water resiliency hearing, I guess you would call it, from Jacobs Engineering, which was excellent. And I agree with Jack. It's probably one of the best presentations I've sat through in many years. And that's not to demean anything else we've seen. We've seen many, many high quality presentations here. So that's not to say the others weren't excellent. This was just really very helpful. To President Russell, 4 of us sat there 2.5 hours. And the decision was made to give us 90 seconds without knowing how many more speakers were going to be. And then after the 4 of us, there weren't too many more. They would have gotten 3 minutes. And my suggestion is next time this happens, the first 4 speakers or so, if you don't have a lot of speakers, give them their full 3 minutes. And if you start to line up a lot of speakers, then adjust accordingly. It just felt a little bit shortchanged. So there's 1 minute of my time. So where I was going last week was Jacobs Engineering had this wonderful chart showing where we're going to be through 2099. And it was very clear that the upper 2 quadrants, dry and hot, or dry and warm, and dry and cold, were prevalent. There were very few along the baseline and very few wet coming up through 2099, which suggests that we're going to have much drier forests, much more intense wildfires like we're seeing right now historically in New Mexico, I believe it is, Arizona, excuse me. And so we have to prepare for that within this study. And where I was headed was what happens if we have what was discussed as a wildfire, then followed by catastrophic flooding? Will we be prepared to take that water? Will that water be then damaged? Will we be prepared to do what may need to be done, which is extra filtration for it? How will water quality be impacted? You know, and can we compare to other watersheds that have gone through this sort of scenario? What will it look like? Then what's really important is where I was headed was we really need to look at the watershed for water harvesting and biodiversity enhancement and biomass management. because that's where we're going to sequester the most carbon. And that's where we're going to do the most good. And it's going to be one of our less expensive and best long-term solutions is managing our watershed to the best of our abilities. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Abby, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. On the issue of vegetation management and carbon sequestration, I wanted to give you guys a heads up on what PG&E has been doing around the county and what other communities have done in response to some of the PG&E tree cutting that has been going on, and just to ensure that you guys understand your role in overseeing them. I know that they don't report to you, and I know the CPUC is really in charge of monitoring that, but you do have a role and a responsibility, as you know, for making sure that they're doing their due diligence. Right now, they're going around and they're marking trees through their contractor, Wilhelm, for takedown, and they're using an arborist that's employed by Wilhelm, and they have a financial interest in taking the trees out. No one wants to see any limbs fall on power lines or any dead trees sit in the watershed when they could cause a fire. But I think that we need to understand, number one, the criteria by which PG&E is removing trees, such as oaks and redwoods. If it's possible for them to trim trees rather than removing them. If they just trim off all the branches and not the whole tree trunk, like it looks like they have done in places in some of the towns, what is the MMWD doing to make sure that they remove the whole tree if it really is diseased and needs to come out? And how can we best support you as a community to use the tools at your disposal? In closing, I just wanted to say that Lafayette in particular in 2020 had a judge grant a temporary restraining order on PG&E to make sure that they didn't take down 17 trees in Lafayette Park because they didn't follow, according to the restraining order, the agreement that they made in 2017. So, you know, we all want to be fire wise and make sure that we're taking down trees that need to come out and that we're responsibly managing the watershed. But we really need to look over the shoulders of PG&E to make sure that they're giving us the proper GPS coordinates, that they're doing what they say and not overreaching, and that they're not financially compensated in some way to their contractor by taking out trees that they don't need to take out. And that's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby.
I have if I could, just a brief comment. I just received a draft letter from the chairman of the Technical Advisory Committee to PG&E, urging them to take a more holistic approach to their tree removal and to incorporate habitat preservation, endangered species protection, and other conservation measures. So I expect the letter will be going out this week. It was sent around to the committee for comments, and it has been discussed, and it looks like that action is going to be taken in the very near future.
Thank you. The next speaker, I think it's the last one, Bill Hansel. Sir, go ahead, speak.
Thank you. This is Bill Hansel. I'm the district manager of the Alto Sanitary District. I'm also the president this year of the Marin County Special Districts Association. I'm actually at a point of order question because I came on to speak to agenda item 5, and as has already been mentioned, the issue of using potable water for our cleaning maintenance in our sanitary agencies. But I thought that would be addressed at that item, not agenda comments. So can you clarify if this is the time to talk to it or then?
You will have an opportunity to speak to that under item 5.
Okay, I'll come back on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, I have a comment. I agree completely with Mr. Minikes. I was guessing about how many speakers there would be. I expected that many more would respond. But I have a question for you, Molly. If we start off with 3 minutes, can we cut the speaker's time during the comments?
I have seen that happen.
We had 4.
Right. I have
Okay,
seen that
so you
happen.
think-
It does feel a bit inequitable, but I think there is some justification for it if there were more speakers than originally expected. Of course, those that spoke at the beginning are just going to simply get more time than those at the end when the time is reduced, but we're still allowing for public comment under the Brown Act. So I think it's a judgment of the president of the board to try to make that call as fairly as possible given the circumstances. But yes, I think it is allowed.
If it matters, we've done it many times at rate hearings and things like that. Yeah.
Right.
After we started, Jack, with the
After we
time
started.
limit.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
As a matter of time management for the meeting.
Right, that's correct.
Right.
Okay. Well, my error. Okay. Thank you all. With that, I would like to ask for director and general managers announcements.
I have one.
Sorry, Jack.
Go ahead, Ben. Go ahead.
No.
I was just going to say I attended in person the WAC meeting in Sonoma yesterday. Paul was there also, and we received a similar report from Jacobs Engineering, and to Larry Minicus, it was equally well done, unbelievably good, and of course, all from the. It was under the contract they have with Sonoma, so it was very interesting, particularly in light of the orientation we had at our meeting for Marin water. So it was definitely it's definitely taking us in the right direction, in my opinion, and Sonoma water as well.
I agree, Jack. I also was able to listen to that meeting because Jack was kind enough to call me and put his phone on speakerphone so I could hear the meeting. But I would like to make a formal request to the WAC that you don't have to be there to be involved in the meeting. I mean, if they want to put restrictions on, you can't speak, that's fine, because I never spoke a word. But I think it's ridiculous that they don't offer any hybrid connection. They don't offer any telephone call in. They don't offer any Zoom connection. It's just, I frankly find it incredulous that they are operating in that mode. For some reason, they're saying, in my case, I would have been at the meeting had I not already been scheduled to go to a meeting in San Diego that I could not get out of. So anyway, I'd like us to make a request, Ben, to them to allow that kind of connection into the meeting.
We'll do that.
I realize we may be, pushing on a rope. I really don't know what their response would be.
We'll go ahead and do that, President Russell.
Okay, I appreciate it. Any other comments, Ben, on the general manager side?
I have a comment, Ben. I'm sure yours will be a little more substantive, but I went to the Marin Conservation League. I guess it was their annual meeting, and our fisheries division, our fisheries program, won the Ted Wellman Water Award. And they specifically called out Greg Andrew, Eric Ettlinger, and Jonathan Kohler. And they were very, very well received and really a lot of affection for what they've done. And Eric gave really good, heartfelt comments. He's a very good speaker and a very good spokesman for our agency. So it really was quite an interesting meeting. They had the state manager of Governor Newsom's 30 by 30 program, which is really kind of an inspiring environmental preservation project that the governor is implementing. But I just wanted to call out the fisheries division for excellent work and really good job and the recognition they rightfully received.
Thank you. That was a very useful comment. Appreciate it. I just had a little comment that I'm a little bit aghast, very frankly, that I was in 3 hotels in Southern California in the last week or so. and not a single hotel had any markings about the drought conditions or conserve water or don't use towels or anything. It's like they're completely oblivious to the problem. And I just was taken aback that not even a little card, you know, like on the bathroom sink that says, you know, please conserve or take short showers and take no shower. And, you know, I think our friends to the south are dropping the ball. Cynthia, anything?
Sorry, nothing for me.
Cynthia?
Nothing for me.
What
Other than
about the finance meeting? Can we get a?
it was really just an update
Right.
on the financial situation. There's really nothing to report.
Okay, that's cool. Alrighty. With that, I need a motion to.
President Russell, I had a very brief, with all this buildup, it's going to feel very light, but I did want to just briefly reflect on a discussion at a recent meeting we had. And this was around the word rationing. And I personally feel that rationing is not a good description of what we've done as a district in the past, and including this recent drought. And allocation is a better descriptor. To my knowledge, the district has never said, you're going to get X gallons and we're going to turn off your faucet after that, which is kind of the message I believe comes with rationing. So I just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Ben. That's exactly the point.
Yeah, I think there might have been a session, Jack, and maybe you could speak to that, after the 76 drought, that there was water rationing in the
Yes,
sense
but
of
not
a budget.
recently, Larry, and that's what we're talking about. Let's really stick with the current situation.
Okay, but Ben said never. That's all I was responding to.
It certainly hasn't been in the last 20 years.
I'll agree with that.
Thank you.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Terry, we're looking for a roll call.
All right, yes, I was on mute. Director Kohler,
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Bregman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have a public hearing on ordinance number 460. Is there going to be a presentation first, Molly, or is it just right into the?
Yes, President Russell, we will have a presentation. I believe Carrie Pollard will be giving the presentation, then we can open the public hearing after that. Thank you.
Okay, great.
All right, very good. You should be able to see my screen. I'm Carrie Pollard, the Water Efficiency Manager. So we actually have 3 items up for consideration this evening. Under this item, one is Ordinance 461, which will incorporate some of the emergency rules and emergency water shortage emergency measure actions into our ongoing water conservation program. Second item is review of ordinance or Ordinance 460, which will deactivate the remaining water shortage emergency restrictions that are currently in place, that have remained in place. And then finally, a resolution to transition from the water shortage emergency to an ongoing call for conservation to align with the state's drought emergency actions. We'll close out with the recommendation and then next steps. On to the next slide here. Okay, so looking at the recommended changes for this evening, starting with Ordinance 461. What this ordinance covers is incorporating 3 specific actions into our ongoing water conservation measures. So these 3 actions were included in our water shortage emergency restrictions, and the thought is that we will bring them forward per board direction, prior direction, for your consideration. So starting with the irrigation restrictions. So this is allowing up to 3 days a week for drip irrigation, and then 2 days a week for spray irrigation. The second item is the sewer cleaning and flushing, that it would require that this be done with recycled water whenever reasonably possible. You'll notice that this language has been shifted from the last meeting, the last doc meeting when this was presented. We did get feedback from the local sanitation agencies, and I understand we have a few on the call as well this evening. And the thought was that we want to encourage them to use recycled water as much as possible, recognizing that it may not be applicable or well suited for every situation. We do include in the staff report that we will do a 5-year check-in on this item, right? Recognizing that we'll continue this ongoing coordination and collaboration with the sanitation agencies to determine whether or not this should remain in place. So we have a 5-year check-in built into this item. And the final item is a pool cover requirement to require pool covers for all swimming pools. This was a drought restriction that was expanded beyond our current code. So the code states, our current code, just in a normal year, states that pool covers are required for new swimming pools. During the drought, it was expanded to be required for all swimming pools. And this item would be to continue that requirement into the future as part of our ongoing water conservation measures. So these items really are meant to enhance our ongoing water efficiency actions. That's the intent of 461. And then when we look at Ordinance 460, it's the deactivation of the remaining water shortage emergency restrictions. So these 4 items have not been repealed as of yet, right? Unlike some of the other items we've already taken off the books. These last 4 items currently remain as prohibitions. So these include pool filling, using potable water to wash your cars, installation of landscapes for new connections, and golf course irrigation is restricted to greens and tees. So approval of Ordinance 460 would no longer require that these items be prohibited. They would remain now, acceptable actions within our community. So the thought around 460, the intent of Ordinance 460 is really to remove the most restrictive emergency response measures that were enacted and that currently remain in place. So we move on to the resolution for ending the water shortage emergency. This resolution calls out and leans on the parameters that are established within our code to when the water shortage emergency should be removed and deactivated. Specifically states that 40,000 acre feet of water of storage is available and is projected to be available on April 1st, then the deactivation via resolution should occur. You can see we have a graph here showing not only on April 1st of 2022 were we above 40,000, we're projecting into next April 1st of 2023 to be also well above 40,000 acre feet. In fact, as of today, we are at normal, 100% of our normal for this time of year. I do want to recognize there's been discussions around these triggers, and a review of the triggers that are within the code are occurring, and these will be brought back. But based on what we currently have adopted, this language is kind of the parameters we can utilize to determine whether or not an emergency shortage should remain in place or not. So when we look at, we want to recognize that despite the recovery for our local supplies, right, much of California does remain in a severe drought. And we can see this from the actions the governor has taken around drought response. There have been draft regulations released by the State Water Board, and we can anticipate on May 4th that they will take those up and consider adoption. What they're looking at is requiring drought response actions be put in place for all water utilities to achieve an up to 20% reduction in demands. And so these actually, this state board action has not taken place yet, right? It's just their draft regulations have been released. So the district is prepared to comply with any water board actions if and when they are adopted. So, but at this time, there's no specific action that we would need to take. Looking at the recommendation, again, there's 3 items. One is adoption of Ordinance 460 to deactivate the water shortage emergency restrictions that remain in place. The other is Ordinance 461 to incorporate some select emergency rules into our ongoing water conservation program. And finally, adopt a resolution to transition from the water shortage emergency into our ongoing conservation to align with the state and any ensuing regulations they may release. Looking at the next steps, continue to track the prohibitions that the state puts in place, including any initiatives, any grant funding or outreach campaigns that they may launch that we can leverage. We will look at our water shortage contingency plan triggers, as I mentioned, recognizing that there's been discussions around the need to evaluate those and determine whether or not they may need to change or not. Continue to water storage levels, and of course, continue the development of the strategic water supply assessment that is underway. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions. This concludes the presentation, and if questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Great. Just to jump in here quickly, there's been a little bit of conversation today about the including sewer flushing and cleaning as a non-essential use. I think we have a few of the sanitary districts represented, and I think this is a drafting issue, but the board hasn't had a chance to discuss it. So I just want to bring forward that subsection K, which states that sewer cleaning and flushing shall be done using recycled water whenever reasonably possible, is underneath the section that specifically prohibits non-essential uses. So I think most of us will agree that sewer flushing probably is an essential use. So I'd like to suggest that we do a little quick revising. Molly, if you feel we can do that in real time, I don't see any reason to delay action. I think this is a drafting issue, but I do want to be sensitive to our colleagues at the sanitation districts and their need to occasionally use some amount of potable supply. I think everybody agrees. I mean, I may be wrong, but I believe everybody, I think there's very strong consensus about the basic thrust of Section K, which is to use recycled water whenever possible, but it is not possible 100% of the time. So, but we don't want to be in the situation where we are, requiring our colleagues to undermine the, their ability to maintain their infrastructure. We certainly know that we need to maintain ours. So I don't want to get ahead of their comments. I'm sure they'll have some things to say about that, but I just want to be sure the board is aware of this issue. And Molly, if you could address what I'm sure is a relatively easy drafting fix.
I think you're absolutely right, Director Kohler. It was a drafting faux pas on our part. We apologize for that. I think that the placement of subsection K could easily be repositioned so that it's item number subsection 5 under the section 1302.020 of the water waste prohibitions. That does mean that it moves away from being a prohibited non-essential use. And just a clarifier for folks looking at the code in the future, they won't be confused by the inconsistency there in the language and the intent of the provision. So thank you for that.
Okay,
Sure.
I should alert you, I'm not likely to vote for something that I haven't already seen.
So understood, and it is Director Gibson, the very same language that's in.
I
the
heard,
ordinance.
I got it. I'm just
Okay.
giving you fair warning. I'm not likely to vote for it in any event, so it doesn't matter.
You're not likely to vote. Oh, this isn't about, Jack, is your.
I'm not likely to vote for 461.
Oh, okay, but it's that's separate from this issue about.
It'll make it moot, what I'm saying, the fact that I don't agree with the language.
I just want to make sure I understand, Jack. Are you disagreeing with removing using water for sewer cleaning and flushing from prohibited activities?
Actually, I haven't heard the whole process yet, but I am. I'm not in favor of the general control that this is establishing on an ongoing basis. So I'm likely to vote against establishing 461 in a normal year.
I see. Okay, but I was just talking about this one narrow thing, but I think they understand.
Right. I'm looking at the broad picture. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have a comment too. Isn't it already covered by whenever it's feasible? I mean, I don't know how they interpreted that, but it seems to me there's an out right in the current wording. It doesn't say it's mandatory. It says whenever feasible.
The problem is Larry, that it's under the broader section that says this
No,
is.
I got that.
So
I got that. I got that.
That is what the problem is that it appears to be an internal conflict, and all Molly is doing is resolving that conflict.
Right, but doesn't having an out take care of the problem?
No.
I think there's an argument, but I think it's better to have clear ordinance. And I think that it would be more clear if we were to eliminate the conflict as Director Kohler is suggesting. This certainly was the intent, President Russell, that.
Okay, the problem, Molly, is it isn't just, in my mind, it isn't just a question of semantics. It's a question of the choice of how you use your water. And I understand if it's only 4 acre feet, it's not a lot of water, but that's over 1 million gallons. And, I don't exactly, I think it's the Alta gentleman, the one who spoke earlier, that said that they use Roto-Rooter and there's a substantial cost because they get hit with standby and they have to go pick up the water and stuff. But I think the Ross Valley is using their own machine. So I don't exactly follow what the cost, and I found that the cost of $600,000 to be just amazing, very frankly.
So
amazing.
if I can
Cost issue.
explain that, if I can attempt to explain the intent behind the provision, and I'll read the provision right now that is in Ordinance 461. It says sewer cleaning / flushing shall be done using recycled water whenever reasonably possible. So this certainly leaves discretion to our partner agencies to make that determination, and cost is certainly a factor that's appropriate to consider. And we're not proposing any change to that language whatsoever. We're just proposing that instead of it being subsection 1K, that it become its own subsection 5. So the language would stay the same. It would just be removed from the prohibition list and placed in its own sort of position of speaking.
I understand all of that, but
Okay.
It seems to me that there's still a back door to it that allows it to be used. Maybe they just took it as the gospel, but I find it a little odd because it seems like there's a way of, well, it wasn't feasible. Okay, I don't think we're going to police them. We're leaving it up to their judgment.
And
Generally,
certainly
Larry, when
agree
there's
with
a
you as
conflict
to the intent.
language-
But, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Generally, when there's a conflict in language like that, it creates uncertainty for agencies that is very uncomfortable. So I'm not understanding your objection to moving this from one section into another section where it's clear. If it's under a section that says it's prohibited, that is going to create a legal challenge for that agency. So all we're trying to do is clarify what the intent.
Even if it says, if it's not practical.
It says only when I think you're not understanding what we're trying to do. We're not changing.
I am understanding it 100%. I'm telling you that I do not agree with the philosophy of using fresh water for sewer flushing unless it's absolutely has to be done. It's a very low quality use of our water.
Well, okay, I think the maybe the thing to do is, now I know we want to have board comments before public comments, but I'm going to suggest, Director Russell, that we maybe hear from those agencies, because my understanding is that there are reasons, technical reasons, to use potable water to some minor extent to ensure the viability of that infrastructure. So at this point, I feel like I should step back and you should hear from those agencies about that.
Before we get into that, because I know that there's an important discussion there, I just want to get a little bit of clarification about the things that we are rescinding here if with this action, if this goes forward. So I'm looking at the board information, and I'm looking at ordinances, a series of other ordinances and other things that I didn't see addressed specifically. So I just want to understand for clarity's sake. So like Ordinance 449 has a number of prohibited acts. All those, everything included in that would be rescinded by this action as well, even though we didn't specifically name them? Or
yes,
ahead,
if I
Molly.
can explain, Director Schmidt, when we encountered the water shortage and the board declared water shortage emergency, we then wanted to put in place a comprehensive set of measures that could be revised without interrupting sort of the the structure of the normal year code. So we created a new chapter of the code, section or chapter 1304, and we moved all of the prohibitions into that chapter and then added to that chapter so that there would be exact clarity and some flexibility for us to augment or extract as the board saw necessary as we move through the water shortage emergency. So when we repeal 449, that is already in place for the most part in chapter 1302. 1302 would revive and be augmented by ordinance 461.
Thank you.
If that's clear. I hope so. It's mechanics of drafting ordinances. And
So any other board comments?
I have a couple comments. So my recollection, when the gentleman, the manager of Ross Valley commented at our last meeting, the comments really centered on the fact that the use of recycled water damaged some of their equipment and that they had to either repair or renovate some fairly expensive equipment. It also causes delay in getting to the areas that need to be cleaned because of the availability of the correct quality of recycled water that they need is not necessarily available where it's needed. So I do think we're kind of treading on the technical expertise of some of these other agencies. You know, I understand, you know, it's a sewer that we're cleaning, but sewers are really sort of central to our public health system. They're being used now to track the virus. So it's not some inconsequential piece of infrastructure. And I think we need to leave it a little bit to the experts as far as what they can do. And I think encouraging them, which this ordinance will do, is the proper path. And I also do agree that putting it under the correct subsection, it's, you know, that's a scrivener's error. Really, it should be under a different section just for purposes of clarity. So I'm a little bit baffled by the controversy, and I do think we need to defer a little bit to the comments we heard really from, you know, the other agencies. I have one other comment, which is a little less, I don't know, heavy duty, but on the pool cover language, we have an existing ordinance which says that all new pools require covers. And the new language, it's sort of backwards. It says all pools need to be covered when not in use. Well, how about if we just say all pools require covers, and then we define what the covers are, and you know, we kind of leave it at that, because I think if you put a cover on your pool, you're going to use it. And it's kind of the same thing we're doing with the sanitary agencies. We're encouraging them, but we're not directing them. And I think that's kind of the way to go. So I just think as far as the drafting of the ordinance, it could be, that language could just be clarified that all pools require covers, period. And, you know, that covers shall be used when the pool is not in use would be like subsection B. So just my comment on drafting a clear ordinance.
Well, if I can comment, I certainly agree with the premise that you're outlining here, and it is my objection throughout this is the level of control we're trying to implement. We definitely shouldn't be telling the sanitary districts how to run their business. They're the professionals, so they know how to do it. And the same thing with pool covers. Concede the pool cover absolutely saves some water, but it's up to the individual to decide. Our community saves water. You know, they understand that. They got the message. Let them choose the way that they can best do it. The pool covers for elderly people particularly are very troublesome, and they restrict the use of the pool. But the premise is really control.
I mean, honestly, to me, you know, I inherited a pool when I moved into the house here in Fairfax. And having a pool is a privilege. It's really quite an extraordinary privilege, and it's also an expense. But by not taking care of it, you're really wasting water. And this is a comment Director Kohler made last time, which is that this, to not cover a pool really is the equivalent of keeping a faucet on for 10 gallons a day every day. It's 3,000 gallons. I don't know if it's a month or a year, but it's a lot of water that you can mitigate by just covering your pool. And I understand there's some issues for some of our elderly residents. Maybe the ordinance should not be directing folks not to have the pool covered all the time when not in use. So I think that would give people the flexibility, but also remind them that if they're not going to be using the pool for a bit, it should be covered, especially when it's windy and hot. You really do lose a lot of water there. So to me, this is preventing water waste. And I think to not encourage that is really an abdication of responsibility on our part.
We should encourage it. We should absolutely encourage it, but that's all we should do. And what you just said should be in an educational piece that we distribute widely.
So we have other restrictions. I mean, the same could be said of all of our irrigation, our landscape irrigation restrictions. You know, I mean, I think that same logic. We have a charge to provide reliable water supplies. In order to do that, we absolutely need our customers to be partners in this, in conserving how much water we use and to use it wisely. And you know, I think that the things that we are asking people to do, they're hardly draconian in the sense that I think that they're extreme. I think we're picking the things that are just so extremely wasteful that it makes common sense. And we already have this as an ordinance that it's on new pools. So now we're, you know, if it was meaningful and the right thing to do for new pools, I think it only seems fair that all the people who had new pools and have had to get covers, that why are they being singled out versus, you know, all the people who have pools. So this strikes me as something that's a no-brainer. I think there's obviously probably a variance process. If people want to say that they have physical limitations that prevent them from being able to use a pool cover, then I'd be fine with creating that kind of variance process for people if need be. I mean, but you know, if you have a pool, you know, this is also, I mean, in terms of the energy saver, I mean, boy, the amount of heating and energy saving that goes on, this is also a climate issue, which is also coming back to bite us with climate impacts on our water supply. So I think this is a prudent thing to do.
I haven't seen any variance procedure.
Well, I think that's an excellent idea, Monty, to throw that on, and that should be called out, because, you know, I have heard from folks that do have problems with it. In the case I heard, they got an automatic cover, that is very costly. You know, you're talking about thousands of dollars to do that. So I think, you know, the requirement that all pools should have covers is reasonable and necessary, with the proviso that, you know, there would be a variance process. And also, again, to me, the drafting should be pools require covers, and should be used when not in use. So one mandatory, one recommended.
Okay, any other comments? With that, let's open the public hearing.
Okay, Mr. Steve Moore, then Larry Minikes. Mr. Moore, I've enabled your speaking permissions.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Loud and clear.
Thank you very much, board members and staff of the Marin Municipal Water District. My name is Steve Moore. I'm the general manager of the Ross Valley Sanitary District, the largest collection system in the MMWD service area. We're about cover about 1/4 of your area. We do our sewer cleaning in-house, unlike many of the other 13 sanitary districts and cities that are in your jurisdiction. We're respectfully requesting that section 21K related to sewer cleaning and flushing be removed from the proposed ordinance 461 and allow recycled water use to be voluntary. The potable water savings are minor, possibly 4 acre-feet a year compared to the 20,000 district-wide use. And the impacts to our essential sewer cleaning operations, which are done to comply with regional and state water board and US EPA requirements, would be significant. As I discussed in my detailed comments, both in writing and my 7 comments at the last operations committee on April 15th, it's an essential use of potable water, actually. And you need to be high quality to be able to go through the small nozzles that enable us to cut roots. And in drought conditions, roots grow very aggressively. We got behind our cleaning this year and had productivity impacts and significant impacts to residences, backups that blew out new remodeled maple floors, et cetera, built-ins, over 300,000 at one residence. And it's because we fell behind on our productivity this year. We're proud of using recycled water use. We pioneered it. We were the first to use it at CMSA. And we believe we've fine-tuned our operation to optimize it. We're proud of it. We mark it as a performance metric. We report on it monthly. We'll continue to track it. But as I mentioned in our last meeting, it's not a matter of phasing toward completely taking potable use out. The available recycled water is not of a quality that's feasible to do. So if you do not remove this language from the permanent prohibitions, alternatively, we believe it must be clarified to specify that recycled water must be locally available without trucking and be reasonably feasible, which requires consideration of cost. For instance, we don't have easy access to recycled water in all areas of our sewer service area. So water will need to be hauled by truck, causing environmental impacts. It could be significant, and while possible, is not economically feasible. For these reasons, language, if not removed, should be revised. And thank you for moving this out of non-essential uses, which was a mistake. Thanks for acknowledging that. But we have suggested language. We would say sewer cleaning and flushing should use recycled water whenever available at the job site without hauling by truck and where reasonably feasible. We strongly recommend the use of the word should instead of shall. That's very important. I think we have to note that if these changes are not made, you should be aware that CEQA exemption under section 15061B3 claimed in section 9 of the proposed ordinance cannot be used because it cannot be said with certainty that there is no possibility that the ordinance may have a significant impact on the environment. And I think that's a key point, is that the common sense exemption to CEQA does not apply. As stated previously, we do not have easy access to recycled water, and therefore any mandate to use it would require us to use trucks to transport recycled water from Central Marin Sanitation Agency or other recycled water entities. Trucking recycled water into and around our service area has potential to result in significant impacts on the environment. For instance, a water truck shuttling recycled water from the CMSA facility to crews located in the field would have to make up to 7 trips per day, as determined by our technical memorandum that we prepared last May 2021. This truck traffic would potentially cause significant impacts related to noise, traffic, greenhouse gases, or air quality. Because it cannot be said with certainty that there's no possibility that the proposed ordinance may have a significant impact on the environment, the common sense exemption cannot apply or be relied upon here. So removal of this section, or alternatively making our requested changes, would help remedy this ordinance's legal deficiency. So we think we want to step back. As I mentioned before, we can work collaboratively without having a requirement to do so. We take a lot of pride in what we've accomplished in recycled water use because there's no distribution system in our service area. And we can provide input on what's possible, but phasing out to, there is no future in our district where we don't use potable water. I'll just be very clear. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I encourage the board to encourage staff to reach out to the sanitary districts and begin a dialogue on what's possible and setting targets that are reasonably achievable and don't impact the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have 6 more speakers, Larry Minikes, then James Krajewski. Mr. Minikes, please, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Mr. Moore. I'm glad he went before me. And I thought there were a lot of very good comments tonight on 2 major issues. And to the first one, you know, it's critical working with several agencies here. And as Mr. Moore was closing, it's critical to work toward collaboration between agencies. And the asks that he's requesting on the surface, I'm not an attorney, nor my board members, seem quite reasonable. What Director Kohler is suggesting, removing the language out of section 2, 1K, and giving it its own section, I believe section 5, sounds like certainly something that needs to be done, but you may be replacing that language anyway after this discussion. I also want to talk to the pool cover issue, and I do agree that it's just wasting water, and that there should be a pool cover ordinance with variances, as both Director Bragman and Director Schmidt were suggesting. Certainly there will be people where you want to do the humanly right thing. Then back to understanding the need for potable water to clean sewer systems. It seems it has to be done, and to some extent. And what may be helpful to the public is if we could get a report from the sanitary districts annually or however, as to how much potable water is used, how much recycled water is used, and just get an understanding of what's really going on there realistically. And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Krajewski.
Hi, thank you. I found this discussion very interesting because as far as I'm concerned, it's all about removing certain rationing restrictions. Someone commented and seemed to be the idea that it's only rationing it if you actually turn off the water. But there are all kinds of ways of turning off our water, which in fact you have done. There you can turn off water via the permit process. So if you can't get a permit to build a pool, you can't fill the pool. So you can't use the water. There are other ways of turning off the water through charges, through fines, because people can't afford to use that amount of water, via prohibitions, via declarations. So I'm really not clear why it is that people are opposed to the R word, rationing. It seems to me it's an irrational opposition. It sounds to me as sort of like a propaganda ministry that somehow comes in one of these foreign countries that we always imagine, except that now we have our own. You can't use the R word. You can only talk about things like demand reduction, like we demand that you reduce your water. So I don't know what's going on with the water district, but I hope you will use some common sense language and some common sense thought about all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next two speakers, 1402, then Bill Hansel. Go ahead, 1402.
James Holmes, Larkspur. I have a comment and question about power washing. If I correctly understand the staff report and the proposed ordinance, it repeals the previous prohibitions on power washing of building and homes, but it retains in the new ordinance a prohibition against washing, quote, washing of sidewalks, walkways, driveways, parking lots, and other hard surfaces by direct hosing is prohibited. Would this, my question is, would this prevent the power washing, which I think it should, the power washing of walkways and driveways? I have seen just in the last month extensive power washing of driveways and walkways in my neighborhood, and this strikes me as a flagrant waste and unnecessary waste of water. And so I would suggest that it be made clear that the using water to wash driveways, walkways, parking lots, and the like is prohibited regardless of whether it's done by a direct hose or by power washing, because there is waste in either case, and I think there's far more waste when you have power washing than if you have things like overspray and runoff. And more generally, I think it's worth considering whether there shouldn't be some reasonable limitation on power washing. It seems to me this is something that has cropped up over the last few years. It wasn't necessary in years past for painting or maintenance, and it seems to be overused in a situation where we have water limitations. It really is almost a yuppie OCD exercise rather than a reasonable necessity. But in any event, I do think it should be made clear that power washing of driveways and walkways is prohibited regardless of whether it's done by direct hose or power washing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Bill Hansel, then we'll have Bonnie Bueller and Ed Jemison. Mr. Hansel, please.
Thank you, President Russell and Directors. Bill Hansel, District Manager of the Alto Sanitary District, and I formerly was the Muir Beach Community Services District Manager and another water agency, and so I certainly respect what you are trying to achieve, and I appreciate your sense of partnership working with the sanitary districts. I agree with Steve Moore's comments in general. I will say I appreciate Director Gibson and Director Bragman's comments about respecting our expertise. We are trying to and do have environmental concerns across the board in mind. I would say that, as a district manager of a smaller district that's part of the SASM agencies and 6, sanitary districts in general, this has been an issue that has been a concern to us, the possible inability to use potable water. But, our agencies do have a health safety directive. We answer to the water board. Even as a small district, I had to go through a very intensive inspection by the water board about all of our procedures, and frankly, what they're concerned about and hold us to are the requirements that, for that health safety. So when we're impeded in our mission, it just makes it that much more difficult to an agency that really could care less. They just they want us and hold us to our standards, and we have to do the best job in addressing that. I will say that in terms of, I do appreciate the revision that's already been suggested. I do agree, as I said, with Steve Moore's suggestions about the phrasing, should it remain. My only other additional comment would be that when this says, as it's been referred to as an out, wherever reasonably possible, well, this is an ordinance of the municipal water district. And so one would assume that wherever reasonably possible means as determined by the district whose ordinance it is, as opposed to saying wherever reasonably possible as determined by the sanitary districts. So we just would, we appreciate that respect. We're happy to work with you and, in the overall mission of water conservation, but we do need to do our jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bonner Bueller, please.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm the manager of the Homestead Valley Sanitary District. We're members of the Joint Power Agency, Sewerage Agency of Southern Marin, of which Bill Hansel and Alto Sanitary District is a part. We do not have actually Title 22 recycled water available. We're currently using what's called 3 water, which is just minimally treated secondary water for sewer flushing. We don't, like Ross Valley, have our own crews. We rely on a third-party Roto-Rooter, and they have only one Vector truck. And not only do we use it for routine cleaning, but for opening up spills when the lines become clogged, and they use the water to wash down the streets. And technically, we can't use that water because it's considered a spill in itself. So not only for routine, but we have problems with the practicality of having one piece of equipment and we have no distribution for it. Like Steve said, we were going to partner with Marin Municipal, and we had a study done, but it wasn't economically feasible to extend the purple piping throughout the Mill Valley area. So we would be faced with trucking water up to like 4 corners from the Mill Valley treatment plant. So it's really, it's feasible, but it's just a cost. I think his figures are probably accurate. We pay Roto-Rooter about $385 an hour. And if we have to spend an extra 2 or 3 hours hauling water that would be readily available at a fire hydrant, that's $1,000 a day for, a minimal amount of water. So I would like to second all of Steve's comments and to ask you to let the districts decide what's feasible rather than the Marin Municipal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Ed Jamison, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. On the relaxation of using potable water for sewer flushing, this ongoing monitoring of the sanitation agencies is just not reasonable. Trying to chase maybe 1 or 2 acre feet annually, given that it's only to be recommended, not required, and requiring the sanitation agencies to do a review of compliance every 5 years, as was mentioned tonight, with such a tiny potential savings is neither practical or reasonable, for perhaps only 1 or 2 acre feet per year. In short, I agree with Directors Bragman and Gibson. I would add that several of the proposed ongoing restrictions are yet another example of this board's big brother inclinations. If old people can't put a cover on their pool, don't try to make them into criminals. Director Gibson has it right. Micromanagement of customers needs to be backed off on. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, any other board comments?
I just to get a sense of the what the other board members feel.
I need a motion.
Oh,
Larry, if you can hear us, your audio is coming through very poorly.
No.
okay. Could I jump in just for a second? To me, I think we need to do a little redrafting.
Okay.
I agree again on moving the sanitation district or sanitary sewer flushing to its own section, just to give it the dignity that it deserves. And I also do agree with modifying it to it being a recommended practice, maybe subject to review every 2 years or something like that. On the pool covers, again, I would change it. Pool covers are required. Section B, residents are encouraged to use the pool cover when the pool cover is not in use. Section C, variances shall be granted where appropriate. Because there are certain residents that have physical limitations or whatever that make using the pool cover regularly more difficult. So, I mean, I think we can accomplish everything we want to accomplish with a little revision. So that's kind of where I'm at on the whole thing.
I would second all those things. Those all sound like the right changes.
Well, that's two of us.
Well, I'm certainly with that. Yeah.
Okay, that's three. That sounds
I'm
getting
good.
there. Good.
Want me to make some effort to talk through that this evening, or is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
I think so. These seem like pretty minor changes, Molly. If
think
you're comfortable procedurally with making these changes in real time?
I will do my best to provide you with the language that I'm hearing from the discussion. And if everybody's happy with that, we do have a recording and I think we could probably get through that. So let me take a stab at that. I do want to point out that the ordinance does have variance procedures, continues to have variance procedures for hardship. So I think that we do have that those allowances built into the ordinance.
I'm not exactly. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, President Russell, I'm not coming through very clearly. Did you want to? Well, I'll continue. If you wanted to make a comment, I can stop. But let's start with section K. Subsection K. We're proposing that we remove that from subsection 1 of 1302 020 and move that into subsection 5. I did hear some language change proposals from our colleagues at within the sanitary agencies. I'll try to reflect that in what I heard, and I will be interested in hearing if that's the board's direction. So currently the provision reads, sewer cleaning, flushing shall be done using recycled water whenever reasonably possible. I heard that revisions could be made to say sewer cleaning / flushing should be done using recycled water when available without hauling by truck and whenever reasonably possible. That was my effort to capture the discussion. I will take a moment to also point out section 7 of the ordinance, which is not part of the code that will be codified, but rather direction to staff that's built into the ordinance in section 7, page 5, that does acknowledge that the more restringent requirements for this activity are not warranted in consideration of the fact that recycled water is not readily available. And it does provide direction to staff to continue to work with their partner agencies and addressing this issue and come back to the board in 5 years to consider whether language changes are warranted given that experience. So I don't know if there's any change that needs to be made with that, but I just wanted to point that out as a companion to the changes that we're looking at for subsection K.
That all sounds reasonable to me. I believe that addresses the concerns that have been raised by the sand districts. How does everybody else feel about that?
Yeah, I think those are the two main points, was availability and trucking.
Okay.
Yep.
So,
all right. So moving on to pool and spa covers, which is section 3C of 1302.021. What I heard was a change to extract the requirement of when it's covered from the fact that it has a cover. So trying to do that as succinctly as possible, given that we wanted trying to get through this tonight, it would say, instead of saying, so current language, all recreational pools and spas shall be covered when not in use. That would be changed to all recreational pools and spas shall have covers, comma, which should be used when not in use.
I like encouraged.
Okay.
Which the district encourages be used
Yeah,
when
well,
not
in
in use.
general, I like, I don't like the use of shall, I like the use of, we encourage
All
it.
right.
We're requiring people to have them, but we're requiring them to own them, but we're encouraging them to use it.
I would say we're encouraging them to have them, you know.
Rather than that they should be required of.
Yeah, exactly. I want to take it away from the mandatory to an encouragement.
Well, it should is not a mandatory statement either, but anyway, I think we're in the same spot. I think we should be honest and just say that they should be used. But either is going to have the same effect.
So I don't
It does.
know.
Can I check with Molly on that? Is Monty correct about that?
Well, there is different, I think, meaning to shall and should. And we do have a shall still in the language where it's saying all recreational pools and spas shall have covers. That to me does sound like a mandatory requirement.
It is. That's
That
the point.
pools and spas
Right.
shall have covers, and which should be used when not in use is less than mandatory, I would say.
Yeah.
Just an encouragement.
Yeah.
That's how I would
Yeah.
interpret that.
Right. Our current ordinances say all new pools shall be covered. So this is like a baby step to get everybody to have a cover, and it's the right thing to do. And, and encouraging folks to use them. And then the other thing is the variance. I would just call that out in subsection B, use of the cover shall be subject to the variance provision in whatever subsection variances are described in the chapter. But I will leave it to you.
Well, the variance procedure applies to the entire ordinance.
Understood. I'm
And
just saying it kind of addresses the concerns that Director Gibson expressed and a few of the other commenters. That's
I assume this is all coming back at a future meeting? Is that what we're talking about? Are you're literally talking about voting on it today?
That is the discretion of the board.
When's our next meeting?
In 2 weeks,
Yeah.
our next regular meeting.
It's in 2 weeks. I just do want to note that there are some provisions that I think we would benefit from moving forward on. For example, plantings. Where we are this time of year, this is the time to quickly plant if you're going to be planting, and the longer we hold that off.
Yeah.
So what we are ideally trying to move this to a vote in, with the language Molly's recommending.
Can I, to that point, because I really agree with Ben on that, I'm not, I have to say I'm a little baffled, as somebody else said earlier, by this conversation about pool covers, but if that's the sticking point, can we move forward on the rest of it? It sounds like we have consensus on the changes Molly's suggesting on the sewer flushing and cleaning. So if we can move forward on that, I mean, if it's essential that we come back on the other, maybe, but I agree. We have a consensus on everything else, it sounds like, or maybe not. I mean, Jack, if you're just voting against everything, then I don't see any reason to delay.
Well, my main driving point here for me is the mandatory versus the variance is very important. And the mandatory requirements. So to the extent we can change these things to encourage as opposed to, shall do this, shall do that, I'm satisfied. That's what I'm looking for. I'm totally satisfied with the changes we're making on the sewer flushing and that I have no issue with that at all. I mean, I think we've taken the trying to control their doing their business out of it all with those changes. So I'm fine. We've given the discretion to them. We're not telling them how to do their job. I'm fine with that. So it's just the subtleties of this other language changes that we're talking about that it's hard to evaluate without seeing it. And
I have a
the variance.
suggestion. How about just changing the pool cover section to all pools and spas shall have a cover, period.
With a variance. Yeah, with a variance procedure.
Well, variance is already there. I mean, that doesn't need to be changed.
So I'm told, yeah.
So
Well,
you're
know, or call it out in, subject to the variance provisions, set forth below. I mean,
Okay. That would do it for me.
That's great. So we can do it tonight. That's good.
Okay. Let me finish my notes here and see where we are. So I'm now hearing that we're going to simplify and emphasize the variance pool and spa covers, period. All recreational pools and spas shall have covers, comma, subject to the variance provisions as set forth in section 1302.050.
Perfect.
Yes?
Yeah.
It's on tape. It's a good thing I have a recording. Is everybody, where are we with that language?
I'm fine.
I'm okay.
So now can I call for the motion?
So
I'm
moved.
just going to reiterate. So we're making the changes to K, moving it to 5, adding the new language regarding when available without hauling by truck. And we're simplifying the pool and spa covers as I just read. And then those are the only changes to Ordinance 461 that we're proceeding with tonight. Correct on that? Okay. Just like to restate it for the record. Thank you.
That's perfect. Thank you for doing that, Molly.
I'd move approval as
Second.
amended.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
and President Russell.
As a point of
Aye.
order, can I clarify the vote on Ordinance 461 or with the vote on 460 as well as the resolution in the package? Do we need to take another motion?
I'm concerned, Molly, you interrupted before President Russell voted.
I'm
Did
sorry.
you do that in the middle of the vote? Because he hasn't voted.
I'm sorry.
I did vote. I just sneezed in the middle of it. I think that might have mucked it up,
Oh.
but the vote was yes.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear
I
you.
apologize if I interrupted that.
Okay, I didn't hear it, sorry.
I thought we had 3 votes to take care.
Yes. So that was, we were voting on Ordinance 461, which would make little sense without Ordinance 460. So I would recommend that we take that one next.
I'll move approval of Ordinance 460.
Second.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye.
The last item is the proposed resolution.
I'll move approval of the resolution.
Second.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye. Okay, thank you. The next item is the turf item. Number 6.
I have this item, President Russell. Carrie Pollard,
you.
Water Efficiency Manager. Let me pull up my presentation here. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is, this is also an action item. We'll be looking at some proposed changes to the turf incentive program. We'll look at the offerings from during the water shortage emergency, and then review the turf program modifications that were discussed at the DOC committee meeting a couple of weeks ago. Looking at anticipated incentive expenditures, and then close out with the recommendation and next steps. So during the water shortage emergency, we took the current offering of the turf incentive program that was $1, increased it to $3, and removed a number of the program requirements to receive that rebate. The goal was to immediately achieve water savings, right? Motivate our customers with that incentive to stop irrigating their lawn, just, you know, to assist us with responding to low reservoir levels. As a result, we had over $1.2 million issued directly in incentives from this program, which exceeded our fiscal year 22 budget for incentives. And if we were going to maintain that same level moving into next fiscal year, it would certainly exceed the adopted budget. As a result, there's been some proposed changes that we're bringing forward. I want to recognize that you know, looking forward, the COSA process is beginning, and the board could look at higher rebates as part of that process if they were interested in you know, offering more down the road. Also wanted to include this slide, which was covered at the last finance meeting, that the proposed changes to the program are really driven by what was seen and discussed at the finance committee, where there were various scenarios that were reviewed looking at the unrestricted fund balance for next fiscal year, depending on various levels of conservation and unbudgeted expenses. And so with that, the recommended program changes for your consideration are to reduce the incentive from $3 a square foot to a tiered level of rebates, offering $1.50 per square foot for projects that install sustainable landscape practices, and then 75 cents for all other projects that where lawn is removed and irrigation is, you know, stopped to those sites. To bring back the planting requirement, to reinstate that, which would require a 50% coverage at maturity with low or very low plants. We are proposing extending the project completion date out to 180 days, which will be able to accommodate the planting requirement for our customers. We'll maintain the square footage limits within the program that we had in place prior. And I do want to note that this would be effective immediately upon adoption for all of our new program applicants. So anyone who's currently in the program would, you know, has already applied and in process would have access to the higher rebate amount that was in place when they applied. Looking at the changes over time to this turf incentive program, as I mentioned, the $1 per square foot was our original offering. It was increased you know, dramatically to great benefit to $3 during the water shortage emergency. And this new tiered rate structure is 75 cents or $1.50. Some of the best practices that would be required to receive that $1.50 are listed here. They include sheet mulching as opposed to physically cutting out or removing the lawn. We would require mostly native plants be installed and also have a alternative water source on site to, again, really want to encourage the sustainable landscape practices at this higher tier. Outreach will continue to be important as we launch this revised program. We would want to start with reaching out to our existing customers who are already in the queue, if you would, encouraging them to complete their project by June 30th. If adopted tonight, that gives them almost an additional 55 extra days beyond their 45 limit they have already been given. So we think that that's very reasonable. We also will continue to lean on and promote the Water Smart Gardening Resource Center that's been developed on our website to provide inspiration and assistance with you know, types of plant material, finding hiring professionals, et cetera, to really help our customers take this action to remove their lawn and install the water use plant material. Looking at the anticipated program expenditures, fiscal year 23 incentives budget was adopted at 591,000. Of that, about 400,000 is allotted for turf rebates. We break that down into our residential sector and our commercial sector. It ends up being about 300,000 we'd estimate would go to residential, and then the remaining 100,000 towards commercial. Of course, these, how much of it's residential, how much commercial will really depend on the applications coming in. So there'll be some flexibility there, but based on our prior experience, it's where we think we'll land over the next fiscal year. So wrapping up with the recommendation, we're proposing that the board approve the turf incentive program changes, putting in place a new tiered rebate offering with a higher incentive for sustainable landscape practices. We'd want to reinstate the requirement to install low or very low water use plant material as part of their project. And we want to extend the time period for project completion. This change would be effective immediately, and we would maintain the maximum square foot limits from the prior program.
Carrie, can you go back? Did I misunderstand? It says new tiered rebate offering a higher incentive. It's actually, am I misunderstanding the proposal? It looks like it's a much lower incentive.
It's a higher incentive for the sustainable landscape practices tier, right? So it's 75 cents for your standard project. And then if you install these sustainable landscape practices, then you would be able to have access to the $1.50 level tier of the rebate.
I think this is really confusing. We're going from $3 a square foot to $1.50. In any rational communications world, that's lower. So I'm sorry. Maybe it's just that it's late and we've been here for a long time, but I'm simply not understanding how it's higher. $3 to $150.
Right, in comparison to the program, the $3 per square foot program, $1.50 is absolutely lower.
Okay, great. Glad I've
got
got
that bullet.
So
was to clarify that the $1.50 amount would be offered for specific sustainable landscape practices that would be part of that project. They would be eligible for that amount.
Right, but isn't what we're doing here slashing by 50% what we're offering for turf changeouts? I mean, shouldn't we be clear about that? That's what we're doing here.
The proposal is to reduce the rebate amounts down to $1.50 two tiered levels, and the highest tier being at $1.50 per square foot.
Right, so it's even lower than that. Okay, all right, thanks.
If I could just briefly note, staff is bringing this. We certainly appreciate. We are still in a drought and need to aggressively move forward conservation initiatives. This is only being brought based on the financial condition that we find ourselves in post the water shortage emergency that we've been talking about. And we do find ourselves kind of, I'm not saying counting pennies now, but really needing to tighten our belt everywhere we can. We're faced with, in fact, the board at the next board meeting is going to be hearing additional paving costs that are very significant, that are not in the graph we've been showing you. That's new information, and likely there'll be other inflationary pressures as well. So it's a tricky balance of trying to do everything, and we're looking at critical vacancies. Do we fill them? Don't we? That sort of environment we're in. So I just wanted to provide that context. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we all appreciate that, but I'm a little surprised this hasn't been brought. We have a conservation committee, and I think coming forward with this kind of proposal at this meeting without this being vetted at the committee level is a little unusual, particularly since, I mean, we're not going to be saving, to your point, Ben, that much. This is kind of pennies. And I think this is a bigger issue than counting. I mean, obviously the fiscal issues are significant, but part of what we talked about at the finance committee is that the numbers that were provided did not include avoided costs. So we're not having a really complete picture about the extent to which the conservation program has actually saved money. It's not, if you only count one side of the ledger and you don't count the other side, it costs this much and you're not looking at how much was saved. I think the board and the public doesn't have a complete picture. And I think the other thing that we've discussed, but has not really been aired, is that these are not annual expenses. The reason this is painful in terms of our operating expenses is because we are treating what are long-term investments as if they're annual expenses, and they're not. I think Carrie would agree, people don't change out their turf every year. This isn't like, the cost of chemicals or, salaries and benefits. I mean, there's no universe in which people are changing out their lawns every year. I think we have consensus on that, right?
People
So
aren't,
these are
don't change
longer
out their
term.
lawns.
So these are longer term investments that we're treating as annual investments, which is why there's a hit to the annual budget. And so you take that and you layer on top of it that we're for some reason excluding the avoided costs that these investments represent. I'm not sure that this is in the best financial interest of the district. We're talking separately, really, at almost every other meeting about our water supply alternatives, which, the entire board, myself included, strongly support. We're talking about tens of millions, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars. And here we are undermining a program that's been very successful, that is much less expensive. This is going to go directly to increasing our water, our water use, and undermining our ability to, to reduce demand on a long-term basis. So I think from a fiscal perspective, I'm struggling to understand the justification.
Yeah, let me be clear. I am looking at this as strictly a near-term cash flow. That's really what this is. And it's approximately, I don't know, Carrie, is it about $1 million additional cost if we were at $3 versus what we're proposing now?
But
so that
you're also
$1
not
million,
saving that water. You're also then going to have to go buy that water that would otherwise be saved.
conservation certainly has long-term water savings, but just from a pure annual cash flow, which is the position unfortunately we're faced with, what we can calculate the savings, but because we're only looking at 1 year, the costs will be far higher, probably an order of magnitude than the savings.
Right, but that's my point, Ben. These are long-term investments. These are not annual expenses. And I think to treat them that way I just think it's problematic. We're not being realistic about, and these programs, they have a momentum, right? And Carrie, you can speak to this. When the programs don't have reliability, they're up, they're down. What makes these programs successful, and this is nationwide, there's an enormous amount of data on this, is that people begin to understand that they're going to be around. They see them being used. They understand, the benefits, and, they talk to their neighbors. It takes time to develop public confidence in the reliability and the accessibility of these programs.
I appreciate all that. And I would just say, as your general manager, my job is to ensure we don't completely deplete our reserves. And that's what we're faced with.
Well,
we're really in a near term.
I just think I'm sorry, that's just a false choice. There are a lot of things we can be doing to save annual expenses. This is something, again, there's no debate that this should not be an annual expense. People do not change out their lawns every year.
I don't disagree with that for sure.
What about stepping it up a little? It does seem to be a pretty drastic reduction. That being said, we've had a drastic reduction in revenue too, which was reported at the finance meeting somewhere in the vicinity of $12 million. So, it's a balance for sure. And, I think it might be worth considering, stepping it down from where we were when it was really an emergency to, a step down level, maybe $2 top tier, $1 for, you know, sort of the non-top tier, non-best practice, and see where the demand is at. Do you, you know, Director Kohler, do you think that is really going to undermine the program given our financial position?
I think there's a lot of things going into our financial position, and a couple $1 million in the budget. You know, obviously we've got a financial situation, but I think to take it all out on the conservation program, which is our cheapest, most affordable way of addressing water supply reliability, when we're talking about spending literally hundreds of millions of dollars on the alternatives, I think that's a challenging position to take in the interest of fiscal responsibility. I mean,
well, I agree that conservation is fiscally responsible and very effective.
Yeah.
Turf replacement, if you got 40,000 square feet per acre,
yeah,
and we're paying $1 a square foot, that's $40,000 an acre. So that's not cheap water either.
But it's much cheaper than what we're looking at. I mean, I'm just saying the problem is that you need a certain level to get people to participate. And we were very effective. I mean, the programs that we were offering were bringing people in. That's why we spent the money. There was demand. I mean, part of my concern is this is happening this hasn't been vetted at a conservation committee meeting. The people who would normally be engaged in this aren't here tonight. I mean, my recommendation would be to take this proposal and set up a conservation committee meeting that this can be. I mean, that would be my proposal. I think I'm completely with the rest of the board about the need to address our financial situation. Obviously, this one thing is not going to do that. So I think we do have the time to have that meeting, to have that conversation, to get the data we need about what benefits there are, what the avoided costs are, and what this really means for our bottom line. And are we really doing what we need to do to be fiscally sound, or are we actually putting ourselves in worse position because we're going to need to go out and buy, more expensive water?
Well,
I'll just weigh in too. I kind of feel like we're making a decision out of context of other factors that we should be looking at together. Yeah. And I think, that as we are rolling back restrictions around water use because of our full reservoirs, that's logical. But we're also still saying to folks, we are, as water leaders and as our jobs as board members and staff of the district to wisely manage our resource and plan ahead. That we know that conservation is an important tool. And so I don't think I feel comfortable rolling back this program separate from seeing how we want to address our overarching problem of ensuring we have reliable water supplies into the future. And we have a water supply analysis that's underway that's going to help shed a lot of light in the next couple of months. It just strikes me that this might be this feels premature at this point in time to take this step when we have a lot of information that's going to be coming in the next couple of months. And this isn't deterministic of our financial well-being. This is a cost, but we're cutting a cost in half. It's several $100,000, which is again is big, but it is a long-term investment and it has savings on water supply. Again, I just think we're making this maybe a little bit out of important context and discussion. So I'd like to propose, I think what Director Kohler is suggesting, that we talk about this at a committee meeting.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. If assuming we have time to do it before staff brings our next budget, if we could get it done in May, then why not?
Well, we do have a conservation committee in May.
Yeah,
so it would work to bring it to that if that's what the board would like to do.
Yeah, I think it's worth a deeper dive. So I do agree with that.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I agree with that. And I want to emphasize, Ben, I think we are all in accord. We are all mindful about the fiscal challenges, but I think, I'm not sure who said it, but this is not going to be determinative. This is, so, particularly given the avoided costs, I think we need to explore those while we're looking at the rest of it.
We'll include those in the Conservation Committee update.
Okay.
That would be good.
Okay, any other comments from the board? Can we have public comment?
Yes, Mr. Ed Jamison, please.
Yeah, thanks. General Manager Hornstein has to deal with an unfolding fiscal almost disaster. He has to run a business facing staff reductions and potential declines in service quality. Any of you who have ever run a business with a need for fiscal responsibility need to back off now. And any of you who are being so repetitive, we all get it once and twice when you say it, but your repetition is wasting everyone's time. Give your general manager a chance to do his job, please. Thanks.
Thank you. There are no further comments.
Okay. With that, could we move to future meetings?
Okay. So I'm going to start off with like the closest or meeting, which is an external meeting. The North Bay Watershed Association meeting is Friday, May 6th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Then next week we'll have our second special meeting, the Strategic Water Supply Assessment Working Session at 5 p.m. Tuesday, May 10th. Then right after that, the following week, we'll have again our regular Board of Directors meeting on May 17th and the Communications and Water Efficiency Committee Wednesday, May 18th. And then also we'll have our Operations Committee meeting on the 20th at 9:30. Any questions?
Yes. Terry, because that special meeting on the 10th isn't a regular meeting, I am realizing I don't have it on my calendar. If you haven't sent a calendar invitation, can I ask you to do that just so I get it scheduled?
Sure.
Or we all get it scheduled, I should say.
Sure.
Other people may not be as reliant as I am on calendar invitations, but I've become completely reliant. So.
Okay, I'll send it to you.
I
And-
appreciate that.
Oopsie. Is the watershed meeting, is that a Zoom type meeting or?
The North Bay Watershed?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Zoom.
Okay.
And why is it 9 to 3, Jack?
It's not 9 to 3, it's 9 to noon.
Oh, 9 to noon, I
Oh,
apologize.
it says 9 to 3 on the,
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't notice that. I thought I heard you say the 3, but I thought I misheard. No, it's 9 to noon.
9 to noon. Okay, thank you.
Actually, 9:30 to noon.
okay. I think that's it. Thank you all.
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you
everybody.
all.
Hi,
See you.
everybody. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Good night.